Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dozer, and if you're new to the show, the mission here is to expose the quacks and gimmicks in the marketing industry while featuring some great marketers and entrepreneurs along the way. On this episode, I'm excited to welcome my guest, Andre Luck. Now, Andre is the founder of Four Leaf Marketing and Consulting based in Miami, Florida. Andre, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we kind of dive into what we're going to talk about today, can you just do a quick intro on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Four Leaf Marketing and Consulting, a brand new marketing and consulting agency here in Miami. My wife and I started it. We'll focus on digital marketing strategy and go-to-market strategy consulting for companies and sports teams. Most of my background's been in sports, so I want to take a lot of the lessons I've learned and apply that to consulting sports teams. And my wife has a marketing background, so you take the sales, you take the marketing, compare us together. Should be a good mix.
I love it. Yeah, and that's how we connected is I saw you were in the B2B sports world, and I think one of your reps actually connected with me on LinkedIn when I was
Yep.
at the Marlins game. So they were doing their job, evidently. So let's talk about your experience in the B2B sales in the sports world,
Yeah.
because that's a hot topic for a lot of people. What are some of the biggest wins that you think you've had throughout your career?
Yeah, I think one that sticks out and comes to mind more recently is not necessarily a win that I had, but as a team. So you mentioned my team connect with you, so I taught them well, connect with the right people, and reach out, on LinkedIn and all the different channels. But we had a chamber event recently at the ballpark, and one of the bigger chamber of commerces here right before the season, and we hosted them, really kick off the season, educate the business community on opportunities to work with the Marlins. And I got a chance to speak, for a brief moment, and I shared because I was giving awards to some of our top clients of thanking them for their support, but shared with the group, hey, there are companies who are seeing real returns from doing business through tickets and seeing direct ROI from that, maybe even more, easily to attribute than maybe some of their other marketing things that they spend on. And so after the session, one of our clients came up to me. I was talking to one of my reps, and he's like, "Actually, I'm one of those people you talked about." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I bought tickets. I forget the exact number. Let's say I spent like $30,000 with him on tickets, and I've already brought back $500,000 in business from just bringing people to games, and there's double that still in the pipeline." So the first thing I said is like, "We don't charge you enough for your tickets," but the second, like, there's opportunities like that all over sports and all over teams, and I really want to educate, sports sellers as they're coming up. Like, there are opportunities for you to make large sales and make big impact in the business community. And just hearing a win like that, like, that, people are doing it. They wouldn't do it if they didn't see, an ROI, but to see that big of an ROI, 15x coming from spending with us, like, that was really cool. And that was a story that we were really telling out in the community to go get new clients.
Yeah, that's really cool. I don't think I asked this. What was your position at the Miami Marlins?
Yeah, I was the vice president of ticket sales and service.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. So knowing how competitive that industry is, I guess, why did you choose to pursue it, right? Is it a passion for the industry? Because there's a lot of other industries out there in B2B sales where you can make two, three, 5x more money, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
So why the sports industry?
Yeah, for me, money was never really a big driver. It was the love for sports, and I think most people are sports fans, and there's that affinity to a local sports team. But how I got started, my last semester in college, I needed a part-time job, and I got an email from. I went to Arizona State. I got an email from the university saying, "Want to work in sports?" I think they blasted the entire student database, and that really resonated with me. I was like, "Wow, that'd be really cool." So it was a part-time ticket sales role, working in the athletic department, and that led to my boss knowing someone who was working at the Arizona Diamondbacks. I grew up in Phoenix. I followed the Diamondbacks from the time that they started, and I was like, wow, that'd be really cool to get to work in professional sports. So after a couple months of working there, he got me connected, and it just kind of grew from there. Baseball was always my passion, so I was blessed to always get to work in baseball, from the Diamondbacks to the Astros to the Marlins. But like you said, it's super competitive, and I think looking back, if I didn't get that start, working in college, I don't know if I would have got that opportunity with Arizona Diamondbacks. So I think just having that, experience in college, and that's why I encourage anyone, do an internship. You never know who you're going to meet. It's such a small network. They can refer you to people so that, you can, if you really want to work in sports, you can grow a career. What you mentioned, there's a lot of long hours. You can make more money doing other sales, but it's really that passion and love for sport that I think a lot of people are attracted to that as a career.
Yeah, networking is definitely huge, not only in the sports world, but business in general, as you and I both know. I'm just curious, just off the top of my head, I had a question here. What was the big difference between working for the Diamondbacks, the Astros, the Marlins? I'm sure there are a lot of similarities, but what would be the difference you'd say between all those organizations?
Yeah, the markets are different. I think Arizona and Miami were a little more similar because they're more small market teams, and they're still newer organizations. You think of the legacy teams, the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Cubs. Like the D-backs and the Marlins are still growing organizations. So I think those are probably more alike. A lot of, somewhat of a retirement community at times too, where people come when the weather's nice, and then snowbirds leave in the summer. So there's always a lot of competition because there's so much to do. And Houston is different because people in Texas love Texas, and so they really rep for their sports teams there, and they have 60 plus years of tradition. When I got there, we were one of the worst teams in baseball, but eventually, on my last few years, we won the World Series, and so there was that fandom built in. They just wanted to see the team win and invest in winning, and ever since then they've had a ton of success over the past let's say 10 years. So I'd say those are probably the big differences, but to your point, a lot of similarities. We share a lot of best practices across the league and the different teams, and all of your counterparts, and you're like, hey, I noticed you had this promotion, or I noticed you guys had success with this, because we all share numbers, and we all jump on calls and just talk about how we can all improve, because we all work technically under Major League Baseball as the big enterprise, and we are
Right.
franchises within it, so we all want to help grow the game as a whole, and then in our selected markets and cities.
And you're not necessarily competing with each other either, so that kind of makes
Yeah.
sense. So, in terms of advice, Andre, I mean, what advice would you give anyone listening to achieve success in the B2B sports world? I guess, how do you separate yourself from the hundreds of people that are trying to get into this and achieve success?
Yeah, I think just sports in general, yeah, you definitely have to be persistent. A lot of people, if you see a position, they may apply and just hope someone reaches out. Go that extra step, be proactive. Find the hiring manager on LinkedIn, reach out to them, network with people like we talked about earlier. Reach out to people that are in the roles that you want to be in. That's taking that extra step. But then once you get into sports and you're in sales and you're focusing more on B2B, it's got to be a commitment to it, because why I think there's so few that do it and do it well in sports is very consumer driven. Like I see the pictures in the background, like you're probably a big sports fan of your local teams, just as I am. And a lot of times we market and sell to the fans and the experience and the families, and the avids that are just diehard sports fans. And then this segment of business, there's a big opportunity because it's less impacted by team performance. You can get higher revenue for your organization, but they aren't necessarily fans of your team. So it's more of a business conversation. You just have to know when you're talking to a fan and a consumer, here's how the conversation goes, and you're talking to a business, here's how that goes. But you need to be committed to doing it, because that gets kind of put on the back burner because you got all these other priorities that are coming your way. And if you don't commit to making business calls and doing outreach on a consistent basis, you're not going to have a lot of success.
Yeah, and that makes sense and really good advice there. So let's transition a little bit to content creation. I noticed that you consistently create content on LinkedIn, maybe some other platforms that I don't follow you on. I guess, what inspired you to start doing that?
Yeah, I was terrified to start. I had got the sense that there's an opportunity specifically on LinkedIn. My last few years in Houston, I had listened to some podcasts, and there's this B2B sales leaders who are saying you need to be active on LinkedIn. I'm like, what am I going to talk about on LinkedIn? Like my buddies are going to make fun of me, like those type of things, right? And I was like, all right, I'm just going to do it. So I started more from like personal development, because that's something that's really big to me, and then also just from a recruiting standpoint, as I'm building a brand and trying to build out a staff, like people knowing who I am as a leader. So I shared just like different tips about, professional development and growth. And I was like, all right, let me do that just like the beginning of each month, just to get out there and start doing it. And the response was great. Everyone's like, wow, this is cool. Like, I love that you're doing that, putting yourself out there. Cause anyone that knows me, like that's not my on position. I'm a little more introverted, I kind of keep to myself. So to be out there on a platform like that is definitely, it's helped and grow and stretch me. But as I, followed different B2B leaders and had different sales consultants that have come in, they're like, from a sales perspective, there's a huge opportunity there, but you have to show up consistently. You can't go there just trying to pitch and sell. You have to provide value. You have to give information. So that's been something I've been really intentional about. And it's like, all right, can I do it once a week? And then I got consistent with that. All right, can I do it a couple times a week? And then last year I was like, all right, can I do something every single day, Monday through Friday? So sometimes it's difficult to all right, what am I going to talk about today? But you just kind of get going. I started early when I was doing it, like just chat GPT, like give me some ideas. And that kind of got the juices flowing. Now it's a little more natural to do that.
Yeah, and that's partly why I have this podcast is it's consistent content. I mean, I
Yep.
schedule everything out a week, even 2 weeks out, and I'm good to go for 20 some days. I don't even think about it, and it's all evergreen, so I don't really have to think about is this relevant? Is it not? It's mostly evergreen tips and tricks.
And one thing I started recently, because I follow a lot of the B2B marketing leaders out there, and they talked about a content flywheel. And what they meant by that is they either have a podcast like this or a live show that they do, like a LinkedIn Live or Zoom with like their community that they have on whatever the topic is. And they use that to fuel other content because they'll take their 20, 30-minute show or maybe hour show and take clips that they can then post on LinkedIn, post on YouTube Shorts, things like that. I was like, all right, well, that's a really cool concept. Like, as I was starting to build out this business, I'm like, I'm going to record a YouTube video once a week talking something about B2B sales or B2B marketing as it relates to sports, 15, 20 minutes, just to, get some content and thoughts out there. And then I take that and I take clips of 2 to 3 minutes and post twice on LinkedIn. You mentioned other platforms. I'm just curious. I've never really been on TikTok or doing reels, so I find like a 60-second clip and I put like a old school like hip hop and R&B beat to it, so it resonates with the millennials, and it's just something music's real big to me. And I'll put that on TikTok. I'll put that on Instagram Reels. I'll put that on YouTube Shorts just to see. And it's interesting because some of the people in my network and within sports, they follow me on other platforms, and they see me doing reels and stuff like that there. So really that one time a week where I record this 15, 20-minute session turns into, at least from a video standpoint, 5 or 6 different content points that I could put out. And then there's obviously written content you could create from that too by taking the transcripts and putting that through AI. And that's something I'm looking towards for the future.
Yeah, I'm going to chat with you about AI here shortly, and I'll have to tell you about Opus Clip when we follow up on this episode, because I use Opus Clip for this
Okay.
podcast, and
Yeah.
you give it a 30-minute episode, chops it up into 15, 20, 20-ish clips, 30 to 60 seconds, auto scheduled to LinkedIn, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok. I mean, it's the real deal for $20 a month, man. So I'll have to show you that after this episode.
That'll
But
save me a lot of hours each week. So yeah, I'm excited.
oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So let's talk about, I guess, someone in the B2B sales role, and personal branding and how important that personal brand element is to that role. Should someone like really focus on the personal brand side? I guess what kind of made you decide to do that?
Yeah, I think it was just, really trying to separate from all those who are out there selling. At least for me, I come from sales. I know this is more of a marketing podcast, but
And people
um,
are getting sick of it too.
sick of what?
Just the sales gimmicks,
Oh
the
yeah.
cold
Yep.
pitching and all the other stuff that goes on.
Yep, yeah, and that's where I was going. Like the phone calls, the emails, and people don't really answer their phone anymore. So you have to get creative. You have to find new ways that you're going to engage with people and to draw them in. Because I heard a stat, and it's definitely is true and resonates with me that out of your target market of people that you're trying to sell to or market to, only 5% are in market to purchase, and you don't even really know who that 5% is. So there's 95% that aren't. So if you're just going with, like you said, a pitch all the time, it's not going to resonate. So you really need to just be out there sharing information, whatever it is you're selling, sharing testimonials, case studies. Hey, I had this client. Here was a success story they had, and just starting to educate and inform people so that when they move in market, they think of you. And personal brands go a lot further than just company brands. So I think each company brand should have, a face or a couple faces within the organization who are building a personal brand and getting out there on LinkedIn, getting out there in the community, wherever your customers consume content. Because some industries, they may not be on LinkedIn, but maybe it's more, Slack communities or it's in-person events. But it's really big to build your brand just for your own personal standpoint. But if you're in sales or marketing, to help grow your business.
Yeah, and I'm not a B2B sales guy, but I'll tell you, doing high ticket lead gen for PPC clients that I have, nurturing these leads,
Yeah.
especially in like high ticket industries, is so important. And it's a step that people, forget about or just don't do.
Yep.
So let's, cap off this content creation segment here. So I guess what are some other tips and tricks that you have on LinkedIn that you've seen work? I mean, types of posts, or is it just consistency? Is it leveraging more video than text posts? Talk about that a little bit and what you've seen work for you.
Yeah, so I'm really testing. I'm seeing. So I'm not the expert there, but I've noticed for me where I get more likes, it's it's funny. It's stuff about like my family. Like we'll have take your kid to work day and I'll post a picture of my daughter like at my desk typing on the keyboard, and I'll get hundreds of likes. Where I'll post something where I'm like, here are, 5 tips that a seller could do to drive more revenue, and I get like no likes. But I heard recently, sometimes you don't want all the likes, because especially from a sales perspective, because that means that your message is probably too broad and it's not hitting the target audience that you want. So you really need to pay attention to the comments that you're getting, the direct messages you're getting, eventually the pipeline that may create from the content that you're doing. So I think video, it definitely stands out. It kind of help stops the scroll a little bit. What I've seen and what I actually stop for, like the carousel type of posts, so almost more like informational type stuff, like these 6 tips, but not just putting in a written post, but putting graphics on each one, and people like to scroll through and slide through that. So I think I'm going to start testing, with that and seeing how that goes. But the biggest thing for me is just consistency. And so I have, some people that I've mentored, and they're like, hey, I want to start using LinkedIn to sell more. And I said, all right, if you just go out and say, for our industry specifically, I have these seats available. Call me if you want to purchase them, or, season tickets are on sale. You have to hope that the person that you're trying to sell to is on LinkedIn the day that you post it and ready to receive that message. So if you just do that once a month or once every couple months, and then you get the feedback, they're like, oh, well, LinkedIn doesn't work. It's like, well, you posted once something that probably didn't resonate with most people. And are you even connected with those people?
Right.
You have to be consistent. You have to build an audience. And for people to want to engage your content, they'll get turned off, as you said earlier, from just salesy tactics. It needs to be value and information, stuff that's relevant for them.
Yeah, and one thing I've learned too is I would rather have a smaller qualified audience
Yep.
where I get maybe 5 likes on a post versus 100 likes from an audience who isn't qualified at all. That's just a lot more valuable.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So let's transition to AI now, Andre. So let's talk about, are you leveraging AI at all right now, and talk about kind of what tools you're using, your processes, etc.
Yeah, really for me right now, it's Chat GPT. And I've tested Claude a little bit just because I've heard people talk about it.
I love Claude.
Yeah, I'm a real like brand affinity person. I'm like, all right, so I started with ChatGPT. I'm rolling with ChatGPT. I wear Nike Air Maxes only. Like that's I stick with one thing. So I tried Claude, and it actually is really good. So I may start using that more. But that's really all that I use for now. And for me, it's like I said earlier, to get ideas going, to get some thoughts out there. If I'm prepping for a sales meeting, I use that a lot. It's like, hey, I'm meeting with a VP of sales in manufacturing. What are some things I could talk about based on what I do, and it just lists like 10 different things, and maybe things I already knew, but it helps kind of get the thoughts going a little bit. There's other tools out there that help, like you mentioned, just with your content creation, and with us running a 2-person marketing agency, we're definitely gonna have to start leveraging and investing in AI just to get more done without having to necessarily bring on more bodies. So every day we're looking at that. I block time throughout the week to study like what are new AI tools that are out there that could help us just work more efficiently as we start to build out the business.
Yeah, absolutely. When I do AI consultations, I always tell people it's like ideation, repurposing content, and then also using it to help with persuasion, right? Whether it's a sales email,
Yep.
if it's asking your boss for a raise, plugging it into ChatGPT and saying like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that word or that sentence, and having it do it in a different tone. It's a very, very powerful tool. So going on that AI topic, I guess, what are some trends that you see that are kind of impacting the B2B sales, whether it's for sports or just B2B sales in general? Where do you see AI making the biggest impact in the near future?
Yeah, I touched on one, that meeting prep, and just especially like for younger, newer sellers that maybe have no business acumen. They spent the past 4 years in college, and now they're reaching out to businesses trying to have an ROI conversation. So I think that can really speed up your business acumen and get your understanding of like what this industry, what are their trends, what do people in this role do, so you just sound more knowledgeable when you're having that conversation. One that we've used a lot within sports specifically is like email marketing through AI. Especially as I talked about earlier, we're heavily consumer focused, but consumers don't necessarily want to talk to a salesperson. They don't necessarily need to like they used to. A lot of the information's at their fingertips. They can go online. A lot of the buying behavior is starting to be more transactional. So what we're seeing is, taking maybe your junior sales staff that would, spend all day making hundreds of outbound calls trying to reach out to these consumers using like a AI automated tool to reach out to them. And what I like about that is, you're getting 8 touch points in a 30-day period, where sometimes, your reps like, oh, I didn't get to all my leads, or I just didn't feel like making all my calls. Like, you're getting your touch points in and everyone's getting the message that you want in an automated cadence and structured. So I've seen a lot of organizations have success with that. And then they can take their salespeople and have them focus on more high revenue, type activities, prospecting, more thoughtful content, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, prospecting new group targets and prospects, things like that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So let's talk about marketing quacks,
Yeah.
Andre. This is the Marketing Quacks podcast after all. So define some marketing quacks or gimmicks that you see in the B2B sports sales industry in particular. I guess what are some things that just make your blood boil?
I wouldn't say blood boil because it takes a lot to really upset me. But one thing I see is I'm going to kind of contradict myself, and I'll explain here. So, um, that we get really good content in sports because you can tell some really cool stories, whether it's like heartfelt behind the scenes about the player and their family
People
and their
love that stuff.
upbringing. Yeah, and I say, all right, if you're going to do it, just let that be. But I've seen people on the back end slap and visit our website to buy tickets to the game. It's like, whoa, like I love this great story. Like, why do you have to add this now ticket message onto it? And where I say I'm going to contradict myself because they are being transactional, I think there isn't enough focus sometimes on, how are your marketing efforts tying to sales? And this probably comes because I have a background in sales and, marketing creates this content sometimes, and there's not always a thought of like, how is this going to drive revenue? How is this going to impact and drive leads for the sales team. And that's where really I'm hoping, our company can fill that void and that gap because I have an understanding of what it's like on the sales side and the need for support to drive content that's going to, get more hand raisers for your sales team. So it's not just all on them, but also understanding what are some core concepts on the marketing side that could help, feed that engine of the sales unit. And then there's a more cohesive unit between sales and marketing within sports. I wouldn't say there's like a strong divide, but there definitely isn't that cohesion between how is this going to help, enable the sales efforts.
Right. What about like content on LinkedIn? Do you have like one of those gimmicks that you see all the time that you're just like, oh, that again,
And on LinkedIn, there's some content you see. It's in sports and out of sports where it's kind of just fluff. It's like, if you want to do well, you got to work hard. It's like, well, yeah, like I know that, but like and this may just be more me. I want to provide value. If someone's going to take the time to read it, I want to share, really personal. I'm very transparent about, struggles, things I've done well and stuff that's really going to impact people. And what I've gotten feedback from is like, hey, like this is really good stuff that like is actually actionable for me. I see a lot of people put stuff out there just to get a bunch of likes or just very broad, generic stuff that doesn't really resonate. So I think if you can take the time and make it thoughtful, like that for me is more on LinkedIn where I think can be used as more of a social network.
I agree 100%. I see those posts all the time where it's like work hard and all those motivational things,
Yeah,
but they have like 20 likes
yeah,
in a span of like 30 minutes. I'm like, it's either all your company pages or you're hiring someone to
yep,
to do those likes. Like you're not going to fool me with that gimmick.
yep.
But anyways, man, this has been fun, Andre. Any final notes that you have for anyone listening on just B2B sales in the sports world, content creation, or anything that we talked about here?
Yeah, in sports specifically, I think there's a big opportunity as I talked about earlier. So really for me, it's really trying to inform and create awareness around that. And where I thought the biggest opportunity was for my new company was going to be on more the marketing side. But what I'm learning as I talk to different sports teams is they still need help on like the sales side. So although it's great to have all these tactics and techniques to drive leads to your sales team, if you don't have a sound foundation on the sales side, it's not going to work anyway. So if you are looking at B2B sales or B2B marketing in sports or out of sports, like make sure that you have a strong foundation on the sales side and like really strong sellers who can, take these good opportunities that you're investing all these marketing dollars in to drive leads to, and they can actually convert them. Once you sell them, they're growing them and they're like really strong salespeople. Because I hear a lot of marketing people talk about tactics on the marketing side, but that has to align with really strong sellers on the sales side. And if you got both of those and really sound practices on both, you're going to have success.
Yeah, inbound sales is huge, man. I mean, even if it's just knowing how to navigate HubSpot,
Yep.
Salesforce, knowing how to nurture. I mean, there's so much that goes into it besides leads,
Yeah.
which is what everyone wants,
You need more quality.
Um, Oh yeah, quality is everything. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is going to be on LinkedIn. So I'm there a lot. Just search my name, Andre Luck. And as I said, we'll start to put out more content around our company as we get our website finalized this week and the page launch. But that's going to be the easiest place to find me.
Cool. Well, Andre, thanks again for joining this episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. And thank you again to everyone for listening to this episode. Be sure to tune in again next time.